how you would go about. Yeah, all right. Well, I know what we'll do.
You know how you can tell he's a neat freak? The folder windows line up.
Oh, it's scary, man. I have OCD so bad, it's not even funny. So, this is actually a more or less finished mix. This is what I'd call like stems, the way that this is right now. But if you were doing a remix, you know, you'd be presented with all these elements and you come up with something new out of them.
Revolution.
Yeah, so we've got a bunch of different elements here. Doesn't like that one. This must be a 24-bit file. So anyway, so we've got a bunch of different elements here, and I'm gonna find the vocals here really quick. If I'm working on a vocal-based track, I'll start with this vocal because it's faster. We could keep this at the tempo that it's at, basically. But if I was working on something, and very frequently I will be working on something that's slow, like Sarah McLachlan's track, I Love You. When I did that, the vocal was like 80 beats per minute. So the first thing I'll do is time stretch the vocal and make it a different tempo. One that's more appropriate for a dance floor sort of thing, if that is in fact what I'm going for. And that can be a really tedious process to get the phrasing to feel appropriate, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Because often I like using time banding a lot, which is a really old program, but works fantastic.
You still use that?
I use it all the time, yeah. It's the only thing I use for time stretching vocals. And so I'll use that, and I'll do like 4 different variations of it. So I'll do one stretching to say it's 80 beats per minute and I need to go to 130, right? Mm-hmm. I'll do one where I stretch it from 80 down to 65. So I do one that's half time, right? I do one where I stretch it from 80 to 120, 80 to 125, and 80 to 130. And then I pull the phrases out of each one of them that works the best and make a composite new vocal at the right tempo. So that's the way that I would start doing something like this. But let's say we've done that already for this. So we'll just take a peek in here and find some elements that we can use to make a mix out of. So there's like, I mean, right off the bat, this vocal thing we can definitely use here. Let's just check some of these out. Hi-hat thing. Where's the gated vocal thing? Right here. Yeah, so this so this is 134. So we could do something that's kind of like a housey thing with this. So I'll just give you a rough idea of how I go about doing this. Remix. And then I'm gonna quit this, because this and Reason don't like being open at the same time. We'll go into Reason, program some house style beats, because it's a breakbeat track, so we'll do like a housey type thing with it. So let's see what we got here.
Do you usually know what kind of sound you're going for, or do you just play around until you find something?
I usually know what I'm going for in general. Like, it's hard for me to actually work if I don't know what I'm going for. Like, I have to have sort of a preconceived idea of where we're going in order to get there. I mean, some people are really good at that. It's just sort of like, all right, let's just mess around and we'll come up with something cool. But that's totally not how I do stuff. As you can see from my symmetrical folders, I have a good idea of where it's going. So I'll go into my sound library area. here, and we'll find ourselves, start the kick drum. Let's see. So all 808s. That's a good one. All right. So let's put in a straight up 4 on the floor kick pattern here, and make it 2 bars long. And then we're going to want to set the tempo to 134, which is the tempo of the track we're working on. So that's our kick drum. Let's find some claps, some hats. That's kind of cool one. Yeah, I like that a lot actually. So I put a dotted 1/8 note delay on those claps. I'm going to find a hi-hat. And again, this is like real rough approximation of how I really go about doing this. Let's see.
Do you usually use Reason to construct your beats?
I use it a lot. I use Reason. I program in the MPC 60 a lot, MPC 3000 rather, and I use Acid. I use a program called Fruity Loops actually on the PC that's really, really cool. Let's get hi-hat.
What does Fruity Loops do?
It's like Reason. It's in fact, it's very similar to Reason, but it's just a different sort of vibe, you know? And because it's a different sort of vibe, you think differently, and I just find it really good to keep yourself thinking outside of the box, to keep changing what it is you work on, because, and that's why I'm so many musicians are not willing to talk about the tools that they use, and I feel like if the tools affect the music that you're making that much, you need to find some new tools, you know what I mean? If you're hoarding your secrets keeping it that close to your chest, there's something wrong in my opinion, you know?
When you work with NSYNC or Britney, do they usually tell you exactly what they're looking for, or do you give them, or do you sort of drive the project?
Well, it depends. I mean, sorry, I'm looking for hi-hat at the same time. Working with NSYNC, working with Justin, you know, he doesn't understand the equipment and stuff, but he's got a good idea of what it is that, you know, he's looking for. But it's, when I'm constructing a track, I prefer to do it alone, just because it's hard for me personally. I mean, some people I guess are, you know, good at it, but to have someone sort of standing over your shoulder, you know what I mean, while you're working, you know what I'm saying? In that kind of environment when you're actually working on the track, they're like, what are you doing now? 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 It's like, all right, go get some coffee and I'll play the track when it's done sort of vibe, you know what I mean? So here we're gonna kick, clap, and hi-hat. Shorten up the hi-hat a bit. Let's find some cool offbeat sounds and stuff. Okay, so now for this, we need to tune that. add some like percussion, get a Rex file going on top of it. Let's see what we got here.
So you mix like a loop behind a constructed
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. So now we gotta really quickly go see what key this song is in. Let's save this on the desktop. Or you know what we can do? Actually, let's just render this and then I'll tune it when we get into Logic. So the way that I'm gonna do this is I'm gonna take and render this beat first, right? Export loop as audio file, remix 1, right? I think that's a 16-bit file. I can't. Yeah, it's got to be. Okay, so we'll render that as 16-bit. Then we're going to render this Rex file as 16-bit. And then we're going to bounce the bass thing down on its own. So we can tune it. Okay. Let's export this bass. All right, cool. And that gives us some stuff to work with. All right, I'm gonna load these audio files here. Okay. Should I add these? Add all of them. Done. Convert them. Okay, and then we're going to start throwing out some of the beats from this original one because I'm too lazy to make new tracks. Alright. Okay, so let's take and start pulling some of our sound files into this original mix. Drag these up here and have a look at them and see what makes sense. So I'm shelving a loop right here, right now. That clap, that Rex file, but I don't want that bass in it. So I'm just taking the bass out of it. I'm gonna take it and normalize it. I'm gonna, time correct it. It's a mess.
Oh, if you could take a screenshot of that too.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, just shout whenever you want a screenshot, man.
Screen.
He answered, yeah.
You guys see what I mean about how involved this gets, right?
Yeah.
This is like, I mean, what I'm doing right now, I'm like simplifying like sort of like a 3-day process, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, way to hear this loop when it's spot on in time. Scary.
Every single transient there, you're setting it down on the...
Putting it perfectly on beat. See, I stretch that past the beat. Cutting that, it's going to be perfectly on beat. All right, I'm gonna make a loop here so we could tune the bass and listen to these elements and see what needs doing, stuff. Bass really quick here. Oops. Okay, so that needs to come up. Off. Yep. It's off a fourth, so we'll just pitch that up. And this I had hitting, I'll show you. I had this hitting on the E of 3. So we're gonna move that back, see that the time stretching, the pitch shifting rather, is changed the timing of it. So I had it hitting on this note right here. Cut this. Now we're gonna have to time stretch the other note to make it fit properly. Okay, so that's now on beat. Now this was happening on the end of 4, so we're gonna have to do the same thing here. So first thing we're gonna do is, see something with that sort of, a bass noise with that lack of harmonic content will time stretch really good, whereas anything that like a Moog bass, something that's like a sine wave, you can stretch in this algorithm, but you can't do it with anything that's got any kind of harmonic, overtones or what have you. Okay, so that is corrected now. It's at the right key. Just give you an idea of how some of these elements can be cut up and used within this, a 4 on the floor thing. It's at this point that I would start I would add a bass line. So typically I go to an analog synth like the 2600 or the Juno 106 or something. to add a bass line to this. And then basically from here it'd be like using stuff like, you know, these vocals and just building an arrangement out of them over top of the new elements, you know, like So I mean, making a remix is all about finding elements that work together. So it's like you got some vocal elements there that are in time, you got a different rhythmic framework for the track, you come up with a couple more synth lines, and then it's just about doing an arrangement. And that's how I do it, man.
Do you have any advice for musicians who are just getting into doing music on a Mac?
Yeah, definitely. I get asked that a lot. I mean, people ask me like what sort of gear they think is cool to start out with, and every time what I tell them is get yourself, obviously, get yourself a Macintosh and get yourself a copy of Reason and a USB keyboard and go to town. You can start making songs in Reason, you know. I think it's a great place to start for people. My biggest advice, though, really more than anything, is to study. You know, I think that people, you know, that are interested in making music should find out what happened before them. Do you know what I mean? So my big advice is to study. Go learn something about music that you're not interested in making. You know, and that'll help with the process of music that you are interested in making. I really believe that. So
You're talking about listening to a lot of different types of music, reading up on.
If you want to be in a rock
musicians.
band, go study jazz. It'll help your writing. It just will, you know. If you want to be a classical musician, you know, learn something about, you know, some of the 20th century guys like John Cage. It'll influence, you know, what you end up liking and playing. It's just good, you know, to seek out things outside of the sphere of what it might be that you're interested in doing. You know, it teaches you more about your craft, I think.
Do you believe anyone can make music on a Mac?
Yeah, I do. I do actually, and I think that that's a really good thing. I think that anyone can make a film on a Mac too, and I think that keeps everyone that's professionals on their toes. And I think it also, you know, instantiates new techniques that people that are treating these sort of tools with, you know, kind of reverence won't come up with. You know, people that are, someone that's 15 in their bedroom messing around with a Mac and a digital video camera like what you guys have got are going to probably come up with something like a million times more interesting than anything that, you know, any traditional filmmaker, you know, would come up with. And I think we're going to start seeing the proliferation of a lot more things like that over the next couple of years, and I think that's so exciting. You know, I think that's really cool.